The Message of Ramakrishna. Egotism is like a cloud that keeps God hidden from our sight. If by the mercy of the Guru, egotism vanishes, God is seen in His full glory. Mukti can be attained only by him who has forgotten self. When the sword has been turned into gold by the touch of philosopher's stone, it continues, no doubt, to have the appearance of the sword, but it can do no harm to any. Our ego, ahankara, similarly, if made pure by realizing God, can do no harm to anyone. If one acquires the conviction that everything is done by God's will, then one becomes only an instrument in the hands of God. One is free even in this life. Thou dost thy work, O Lord, but people say, I do it. So long as these passions are directed towards the world and its objects, they are enemies. But when they are directed towards the deity, they become the best friends of man, for they take him to God. The desire for things worldly must be changed into longing for God. The anger which you feel towards your fellow creatures must be directed towards God, for not manifesting Himself to you, and so on with all the other passions. The passions need not and cannot be eradicated, but they can be educated and turned into a different channel. You see many stars at night in the sky, but find them not when the sun rises. Can you say that there are no stars in the heaven of the day? So, O man, because you behold not God in the days of your ignorance, say not that there is no God. It is the nature of the lamp to give light. With its help, some may cook food, some may forge deeds, and some may read the Bhagavata scriptures. Is it the fault of the light? So is it the fault of God that some try to attain salvation with the help of His holy name, while others use His name for success in attempted theft? The vegetables in the cooking pot move and leap till the children think they are living beings. But the grown-ups explain that they are not moving of themselves. If the fire be taken away, they will soon cease to stir. So it is ignorance that thinks I am the doer. All our strength is the strength of God. All is silent if the fire be removed. A marionette dances well while the wires are pulled, but when the master's hand is gone, it falls inert. Seekest thou God? Then see Him in man. His divinity is manifest more in man than in any other object. Look around for a man with a love of God that overflows, a man who lives, moves, and has his being in God, a man intoxicated with His love. In such a man has God incarnated Himself. The Lord is very quick-eared. Indeed, He hears everything. He has heard every time you have prayed to Him, and is sure to manifest Himself to you some day or other, at least at the time of your death. The grace of God does not consist in giving us our daily bread. Every father is bound to provide his children with food and raiment. He is truly gracious when He gives us strength to overcome our daily temptations. His grace is blowing day and night over your head. Unfurl the sails of your boat if you want to make rapid progress through the ocean of life. The same being whom the Vedantists call Brahman is called Atman by the yogis and Bhagavan by the bhaktas. The same Brahmana, when he conducts worship, is called the priest, but when employed in the kitchen, is called a cook. Thus God the Absolute cannot be thought of apart from the idea of God with attributes, or the personal God, and vice versa. God is one, but many are His aspects. As one master of the house appears in various aspects, being father to one, brother to another, and husband to a third. So one God is described and called in various ways according to the particular aspect in which he appears to his particular worshipper. There are various faiths in the world. As many faiths, so many paths. But everyone thinks his faith alone to be the right one, that his own watch alone is going right. But then, however wrong the other watches may be, the sun is going right. One has to correct all watches by that. Many are the names of God and infinite the forms through which he may be approached. In whatever name and form you worship him, through that he will be realized by you. God is only one and not two. Different people call him by different names, some as Allah, some as God, and others as Krishna, Shiva, and Brahman. It is like the water in a lake. Some drink it at one place and call it Jal, others at another place and call it Pani, and still others at a third place and call it water. The Hindus call it Jal, the Christians water, and the Muslims Pani, but it is one and the same thing. Opinions are but paths. Each religion is only a path leading to God, as rivers come from different directions and ultimately become one in the one ocean. A truly religious man should think that other religions also are paths leading to truth. We should always maintain an attitude of respect towards other religions. Remain always strong and steadfast in your own faith, but eschew all bigotry and intolerance. The true nature of the Jiva is eternal, existence, knowledge, bliss. It is egotism that has brought about so many upadhis, limiting adjuncts, till he has quite forgotten his own nature. The worldly minded never come to their senses, even though they suffer and have terrible experiences. Camels are very fond of thorny shrubs. The more they eat of them, the more do their mouths bleed, yet they do not refrain from making them their food. The worldly soul, brought up and accustomed to materialistic thoughts and surroundings, cannot breathe long in an atmosphere of purity and renunciation without feeling restlessness and discomfort. As a nail cannot be driven into a stone, yet it enters easily into the earth, so the advice of the pious does not affect the soul of a worldly man, while it pierces deep into the heart of a believer. A spring cushion is pressed down when one sits upon it, but soon resumes its shape when the pressure is removed. So is it with worldly men. They are full of religious sentiment so long as they hear religious talk, but as soon as they enter into the daily routine of the world, they forget all those high and noble thoughts and become as impure as ever. The story goes that when the Malaya breeze blows, those trees that have stout hearts are converted into sandalwood, but those which have no stamina, like the bamboo and plantain, remain unchanged. Thus, when divine grace descends, men having the germs of piety and goodness in them are changed at once into holy beings and become infilled with divinity, but worthless and worldly men remain as before. As on the troubled surface of a lake, the moon is reflected in broken images, so on the unsettled mind of the worldly man engrossed in Maya, the reflection of God is broken and partial. The nearer you come to God, the less are you disposed to question and reason. When you come up to Him, when you behold Him as the reality, then all noise, all disputations are at an end. Then it is the time for sleep, that is, for enjoyment, which comes in Samadhi, in which one is in a state of communion with the blessed vision divine. That knowledge which purifies the intellect is the true knowledge. Everything else is non-knowledge. Good and evil cannot bind him who has realized the oneness of nature and himself with Brahman. He is truly an Atma-Jnani, a knower of the self, who is dead even in this life, that is to say, whose passions and desires have all been destroyed as in a dead body. When a thorn runs into your foot, you take it out with another thorn, and having done so, you throw them both away. So, relative knowledge or vidya is necessary to remove relative ignorance or avidya, which blinds the eyes of the self. But before a man can attain the highest jnana, he must do away with both of them. For God or Brahman is above and beyond both knowledge and ignorance, above and beyond all relativity. If by the grace of God, the spirit of immediate renunciation comes to one, then one may get rid of the attachment to lust and wealth, and so alone become free from all worldly bondages. World-bound souls cannot resist the temptation of woman, sex, and wealth, and direct their minds to God, even though these things bring upon them 1,000 humiliations. When a paper is moistened with oil, it cannot be written upon. So the soul, spoiled by the oil of sense enjoyment, is unfit for spiritual devotion. But just as the oiled paper, when overlaid with chalk, can be written upon again, so when the soul is chalked over with renunciation, it once more becomes fit for spiritual progress. When the mind is free from attachment to sense objects, it goes straight to God and is fixed on Him. Bound souls become free in this way. That soul is bound which takes the path that leads away from God. If there is a small hole in the bottom of a jar, the whole water flows out by and by. Similarly, if there be the slightest tinge of worldliness in the aspirant, all his exertions come to naught. Woman is disarmed when you view her as the manifestation of the Divine Mother. All women are portions of that Blessed One and should be looked upon as mothers. Woman, whether naturally good or not, whether chaste or unchaste, should always be regarded as images of the blissful Divine Mother. The human mind is like a package of mustard seeds. As it is very difficult to gather the seeds that escape out of a torn package and are scattered in all directions, so when the human mind runs in diverse directions and is occupied with many worldly things, it is not a very easy task to collect and concentrate it. The mind of a youth, not running in diverse directions, can be easily fixed on anything, but the mind of an old man, being totally occupied with worldly things, it is very hard for him to draw it away from them and fix it on God. Religious advice produces no impression on the imprisoned soul or Baddha Jiva. What is the use of loudly crying, O God, O God? Regularly practice devotion and you shall see God. One must realize in one's soul all that is spoken of in the scriptures. Mere reading will not bring knowledge or salvation so long as one is attached to the world, so long as one loves woman and gold, that is, carnality and worldliness. You get what you seek. He who seeks God gets Him. He who seeks for wealth or power gets that. Verily, verily I say unto you, that he who wants Him finds Him. Go and verify it in your own life. Try for 3 days and you are sure to succeed. In this Kali Yuga, even 3 days are enough to make a man perfect. As the dawn heralds the rising sun, so sincerity, unselfishness, purity, and righteousness precede the advent of the Lord. The darkness of centuries is dispersed so soon as a single light is brought into the room. The accumulated ignorance and misdoings of innumerable births vanish at one glance of the gracious God. Fences must be put about young plants, or cattle will destroy them. But when they have become great trees, elephants by the score can be chained to their trunks without any fear of harming them. So also, if one lives in the midst of sense pleasures, after having attained the highest knowledge, nothing in the world can daunt or unbalance one. As village girls in India carry 4 or 5 water pots one upon the other on their heads, talking all the way about their joys and sorrows, without allowing even a drop of water to be spilt, so must the traveller walk in the path of virtue. In whatever circumstances he may be placed, let him always take heed that his heart does not swerve from the true path. Cry unto the Lord with a longing and yearning heart, and then you shall see him. People would shed a jug full of tears for the sake of their wife and children. They would drown themselves in flood of tears for the sake of money. But who cries for the Lord? Give up everything to him, resign yourself to him, and your troubles and sorrows will be at an end. Then you will come to know that everything is done by his will alone. A devotee asked his guru, "Sir, how can we attain God?" The guru took him to the sea and immersed him under water. After a short time, he released him and asked him, "How did you feel?" The devotee replied, "I felt as though my last moment were come. The condition was desperate." Upon this, the guru said, "You shall see God when your yearning for him will be as intense as your yearning for a breath of air just now." I must attain perfection in this life. Yeah, in 3 days I must find God. Nay, with a single utterance of his name, I will draw him to me. By such violent love, the Lord is quickly attracted. The lukewarm lover takes ages to reach him, if indeed he does so at all. The hereditary agriculturist does not leave off tilling the soil, though it may not rain for 12 consecutive years, while those who do not belong strictly to that class, but take to agriculture in the hope of making large profits, are discouraged by one season of drought. The true believer does not give up repeating his glory, even if, with his lifelong devotion, he fails to see God. He who gives up the world altogether, without taking thought for the morrow as to what he shall eat or wherewith he shall be clothed, is a true sannyasin. He is like a man who climbs to the top of a lofty tree and lets himself fall from that eminence without any thought of saving his life and limbs. The mind is everything. If the mind loses its liberty, you lose yours. If the mind is free, you are free too. The mind may be dipped in any color, like a white cloth fresh from the wash. Study English, and you must mix English words in your talk in spite of yourself. The Pandit who studies Sanskrit must quote verses. If the mind be kept in bad company, it will color one's thought and conversation. Placed in the midst of devotees, it shall meditate upon God and God alone. It changes its nature according to the things amongst which it lives and acts. He alone enters the kingdom of heaven who is not a thief of his own thought. In other words, guilelessness and simple faith are the roads to that kingdom. He alone possesses the spirit of true renunciation who, on meeting a young woman in a lonely place, turns away from her, saluting her in his mind as his own mother. But he who acts in this way in the public gaze for the sake of show cannot be said to be a genuine Tyagi, man of renunciation. What you think, you should say. Let there be harmony between your thoughts and words. Otherwise, if you merely tell that God is your all in all, while your mind has made the world its all in all, you cannot derive any benefit thereby. Unless one becomes as simple as a child, one cannot reach divine illumination. Give up your vanity about the worldly knowledge you have acquired, and know it to be futile in the realm of higher truth. Be as simple as a child, and then only you will reach the knowledge of the truth. The tree laden with fruit always bends low. So if you wish to be great, be lowly and meek. The quality of forbearance is of the highest importance to every man. He alone is not destroyed who possesses this quality. To him who is perfect in meditation, salvation is very near, is an old saying. A man may be said to have attained perfection in meditation when, as soon as he sits down to meditate, he becomes surrounded with the divine atmosphere and his soul communes with God. He who, at the time of contemplation, is so entirely unconscious of everything outside that he would not know if birds were to nest in his hair, has acquired the perfection of meditative power. The mind, the forest, and the retired corner are the three places for meditation. God can never appear where there is shame, hatred, or fear. The stone may remain in water for numberless years, and yet the water will never penetrate it. But clay is soon softened into mud by coming in contact with water. So the strong heart of the faithful does not despair in the midst of trials and persecutions, but the man of weak faith is shaken even by the most trifling cause. The adoption of suitable costume is good. Dressed in the sannyasin's orange robe or carrying the religious mendicant's tambourine and cymbals, a man can never utter light and profane things or sing profane songs. But a man, dressed in the smart style of a beau, will naturally have his heart inclined to think worldly thoughts and sing love songs. The orange dress brings with it pure associations. The wearing of worn-out shoes and torn clothes brings thoughts of humility into the mind. Dressing smartly in pants and coat, with patent leather shoes on, makes one naturally feel elated with pride and vanity. By wearing the black-bordered dhoti, one feels impelled to be lively and sing love songs. The wearing of the orange garb of the sannyasin causes sacred thoughts naturally to rise in the mind. Every kind of dress in itself means nothing very particular. Indulgence in futile talks and criticism concerning others only distract the mind and make one forgetful of the contemplation of the self, or Paramatman. Very few understand that the aim of human life is to see God. As when going to a strange country, one must abide by the directions of one who knows the road, while taking the advice of many would lead to confusion, so in trying to reach God, one should follow implicitly the advice of a single Guru who knows the way to God. Whoever can call on the Almighty with sincerity and intense earnestness needs no Guru, but such earnestness is rare, hence the necessity of a Guru or guide. There are classes of religious teachers who are like three different classes of doctors. There is one type of medical men who, when they are called in, look at the patient, feel his pulse, prescribe the necessary medicines, and then ask him to take them. If he declines to do so, they go away without troubling themselves further about the matter. This is the lowest class of doctors. In the same way, there are some religious teachers who do not care much whether their teachings are valued and acted up to or not. Doctors of the second type not only ask the patient to take their medicine, but they go further. They expostulate with him in case he shows any reluctance to take it. In the same way, those religious teachers who leave no stone unturned to make other people walk in the ways of righteousness and truth by means of gentle persuasion can be said to belong to the next higher class. The third and highest kind of doctors would proceed to use force with a patient in case their expostulation fails. Such an advisor would go to the length of putting his knee on the chest of the patient and forcing the medicine down his throat. Similarly, there are some religious teachers who would use force, if necessary, on their disciples with a view to making them walk in the way of the Lord. These belong to the highest class. When a fire burns, the moths come, one knows not whence, and fall into it and die. The fire does not invite the moth to its fate. Even such is the preaching of the perfect. They do not go about calling others, but hundreds come to them, no one knows whence, of their own accord, seeking to have instruction from them. First, set up God in the temple of the heart. First, realize Him. Speeches, lectures, and the rest, these may be taken up after you have seen God, not before. People talk glibly of God and Brahman, while all the time they are attached to things of the world. What does all this amount to? Mere blowing of the conch shell in the Aratrika, without any God to worship within the temple. Loving devotion does not come without great love for God and a feeling of such personal possession as God is mine. There are two characteristics of love. First, the world is forgotten. Such love for God as makes one unconscious of external things. Chaitanya Deva, on seeing the forest, thought always of Vrindavan, and on seeing the sea, thought always of the Yamuna. The second sign is that there is no care even for one's own body, otherwise so dear. Identity with the physical body leaves him altogether. Such love does not come without seeing God. The two characteristics of prema, deepest love, are, first, forgetfulness of the external world, and second, forgetfulness of one's own body. God, the scripture, Bhagavata, and his devotee are all to be regarded as one, that is, in one and the same light. It is very difficult to understand the real nature of a devotee, whether he follows the path of love or knowledge. The elephant has two sets of teeth, the external tusk for mere show and the inner teeth which serve as grinders. Similarly, the devotee often hides his real nature and assumes some other. First obtain bhakti, devotion, and all other things shall be added unto you. First bhakti, then work. Work apart from bhakti is helpless and cannot stand. For this Kali Yuga, Naradiya Bhakti, as it is called, or communion with God by love, devotion, and self-surrender, as recommended by the Rishi Narada, is enjoined. There is hardly time for Karma Yoga, that is to say, doing all the duties laid upon man by the scriptures. He who has the spirit of devotion in him receives an awakening in holy places, and that spirit becomes intensified. But what will one gain in particular who has not that spirit in him? Even going to live in holy places, his mind will all the same be engaged in worldly thoughts and pursuits. A beggar would be acting very foolishly were he to go to the king's palace and beg for such insignificant things as a gourd or pumpkin. Similarly, a devotee would be acting foolishly were he to appear at the threshold of the King of Kings and beg for psychic powers, neglecting the priceless gifts of true knowledge and love of God. The divine sages form, as it were, the inner circle of God's nearest relatives. They are like friends, companions, kinsmen of God. Ordinary beings form the outer circle or are the creatures of God. God looks at the working of one's mind. He does not take into account what in particular a person is doing or where he is lying. The Lord recognizes the motive alone. Take my word for it that if your prayer is antarika, comes from the bottom of your heart, my mother will respond to it, if you will only wait. Pray to her again if you want to realize her impersonal self. Should she deign to grant you a prayer, for she is omnipotent, you will be in a position to realize her impersonal self in samadhi. This is precisely the same thing as Brahmajnana. Knowledge leads to unity, and ignorance to diversity. Pure knowledge and pure love are both one and the same. Pure knowledge leads to the same goal which is reached by pure devotion, bhakti. What is the good of merely repeating the word Shivoham? It is only when one, by perfect meditation on the Lord in the temple of one's heart, has lost all idea of self and realized the Lord Shiva within, that one is entitled to utter this sacred word. What good can the mere repetition of the formula do without the realization? So long as the stage of realization is not reached, it is better to regard the Lord as the Master and oneself as His humble servant. The kite and the vulture soar high up in the air, but all the time their eyes are fixed on charnel pits in search of putrid carcasses. The minds of the so-called learned scholars are attached to things of the world. Hence it is that they cannot acquire true knowledge. What good could the reading of a vast number of sacred works do them? The wise man says always, "It is Thou, O Lord, it is Thou." But the ignorant and deluded say, "It is I, it is I." He is truly wise who has seen the Lord. Such a man becomes like a little child. His individuality is merely in appearance, not in reality. The self of the child is nothing like the self of the grown-up man. After one has reached perfection, siddhi, that is, has seen the Lord, one becomes incapable of doing anything wrong. A perfect dancer never makes a wrong step. That man who, living in the midst of the temptations of the world, can discipline his mind by devotional exercises, is the true hero. The true hero can look in any direction he chooses while carrying a heavy burden on his head. Similarly, the perfect man, whose mind is thoroughly disciplined, has his eyes constantly directed towards God, even when he is weighed down by the burden of worldly duties. Man is born in this world to realize God. It is not good to forget that and divert the mind to other things. He is born to no purpose who, having the rare privilege of being born a man, is unable to realize God in this life. God is in all men, but all men are not in God. That is the reason why they suffer. As a lamp cannot burn without oil, so a man cannot live without God. As one thinks of cases and courts on seeing a lawyer, and of disease and medicine on seeing a physician, so one remembers God and the hereafter on seeing a pious devotee. He who can resign himself to the will of the Almighty with simple faith and guileless love realizes God very quickly. As dry leaves are blown hither and thither by the wind, without any choice of their own, so those who depend upon God move in harmony with His will and leave themselves in His hands with perfect non-resistance. Only two kinds of people can attain to self-knowledge: those whose minds are not encumbered at all with learning, that is to say, not overcrowded with thoughts borrowed from others, and those who, after studying all the scriptures and sciences, have come to realize that they know nothing. In the kingdom of God, reason, intellect, and learning are of no avail. There the dumb speak, the blind see, and the deaf hear. When camphor is burnt, no residue is left. When discrimination ends and formless samadhi is attained, there is neither I, nor thou, nor this universe, for this mind and all its egotism are merged in the absolute Brahman. The avatars are born with divine powers and divine qualities. They can go into and stay in any state of realization, from the highest to the lowest. In a king's palace, a stranger can go only to the outer quarters, but the king's own child, the prince of the house, is free to go to every corner. When a Savior becomes incarnate, all are saved through His grace. The perfected men who are called Siddhas only save themselves by much pain and penance. The Lord takes the human body for the sake of those pure souls who love the Lord. No one knows the immensity of the sacrifice which God makes when He incarnates Himself. Published by Advaita Ashrama, Publication House of Ramakrishna Mutt, Belumat.